Hey YouTube, in this video I'm be talking about what would be required to go sub 10 for the 100 meters. Listening to this, you might be thinking, why would I know how to go sub 10 when I'm not sub 10? And the reason's actually simple, because it's easy to go sub 10, not actually do the deed and go sub 10, but talk about what you need to do to go sub 10 in a general basis. In a more complex and more individual basis, it would be a bit more harder, which is why not many people have gone sub 10 when you look at the entire population. However, it is important to understand that us as humans, we've evolved, and it is becoming easier and easier to break speed barriers. There was a time where it seemed like sub 10 was never even going to happen, and now it's happened by many people, many different ethnicities and ages, which are just like from literally 18 years old up to 40, from blacks to whites to Asians. Basically, everyone that could go sub 10 now by this point basically has, which means genetics isn't really much of a factor into whether you can go sub 10. Sure, it does help you, but it's not the be-all end-all. You can have relatively poor genetics and still have a good chance of going sub 10. It's just the way you'd have to train would be much harder than way someone who's more genetically gifted would be. But it doesn't mean you should give up all hope, because there is still a chance you could do it, and you could even break the world record on 958. Though obviously the chances are happening relatively low, but you should never say never. A lot of impossible things happen. There was a time where we never thought Su Bing Chan would go sub 10, and now he's 983, which is just going to show a lot of things can happen that could result in you going sub 10. And I'm just gonna go over a few of the things that you can, like the main things, and if the things that you should also like think about whilst you're trying to see if you go sub 10, if you get caught in a barrier of low 10 seconds. So to go sub 10, first of all, plyometrics, extremely important. You cannot neglect plyometrics. Reason being, your muscles only propel you so far in the 100 meter, and in fact any sprint distance other than really the 60, even there too. So if you want to get a really low time, it's extremely important you use the thing that's actually going to propel you forwards in the race effectively. And that's your tendons, and the way to train your tendons is with plyometrics, because you want to make sure they're as stiff as possible. The difference between non-elite sprinters and elite sprinters, there's quite a few. So you've got glute size, hamstring size, but one of the more overlooked things, purely because it's not as visible, is tendon stiffness. We can't actually look at how stiff your tendons are, I believe, but we can see how your foot reacts to the ground. And by looking at foot reactions, we're able to see that more elite athletes are less pliable with their feet. They don't move as much. They just stay dorsiflex for the entire time compared to non-elite sprinters. And this is because they've been doing more plyometrics than you. They've been doing more plyometrics than you to a higher quality. Not quantity, quality. They've been doing this longer than you, which has resulted in them being much faster than you are, and why their tendons are so stiff. I'm sure that, in fact, I don't have to say I'm sure, there are a lot of people who are sub 10 who look like they don't have much muscle, but they have very, very strong tendons. And since the majority of the work of sprinting is literally done by your tendons, it's understandable why people of different body sizes are able to go sub 10, purely because some of them did slightly rely heavily on their muscles for majority of the race, but they still had better tendons, much better tendons than you did. So whilst their times can still get much better, even if their times don't get much better, they're still sub 10 whilst you're not, which you might be able to go sub 10 without extremely strong tendons. However, it's much better to not bet on one thing and bet on a more sure thing and more things than it is to just bet on going to the gym and getting strong enough. Because if going to the gym and getting strong enough was a good enough reason, getting more muscle was a good enough reason for anyone to go sub 10, a lot more people would have gone sub 10 by now. Like, just look at powerlifters. They were a good example of a lot more people that could have go sub 10, because they have numbers that are equal to or more than equal some numbers of the best sprinters out there in the gym, but they're not anywhere close to sub 10. The reason being their tendons aren't anywhere close to the sprinters' tendons are. These elite sprinters anyway, because the way they train is very different. And this is because they transfer their power into speed, which is one of the most important factors you can get from going to the gym, and why a lot of people who have a lot of power don't see much speed on track, is because they fail to transfer all of their power into speed, something they still need to do. Other than that, the most obvious thing that you need to do if you want to go sub 10, immaculate form. Your form has to be immaculate. It doesn't have to be textbook, because there are some people who don't sprint in a textbook manner but are able to go fast. Like, look at Usain Bolt, for example. His form is not saying he's not textbook. It's quite close, but it's very different to other people's. Justin Gatlin, he overstrides relatively in the start. It's not textbook, but it works for him. You have to find what works for you. But generally, following the textbook form is a great basis to go off. It will get you low enough to the 10 seconds. And the reason why it'll get you that low is because it's actually quite funny. Sprinting, you can only really learn, your brain can only learn it, and then it can try and teach your body. But also, when you're running, the more you do it, the better you can become. Sprinting is very different. You actually need to teach your body what you want it to do. Whilst with running, your body is just, your body, not your body specifically, but through evolution, your body has essentially done basically millions years worth of running. And the more you run, the more it's just going to be able to adapt into the most evolved form of running it possibly can. But sprinting, you're going to have to teach it that, which means you're going to have to go over your form again and again and again and again. You want to make sure you get in the right positions. You want to make sure you're firing from the right muscles in these positions. And you want to make sure you're firing these right muscles in these positions at the right time. Timing is extremely important. Now that the form's done, timing, you want to make sure that you're firing your muscles at the correct time. Because if your muscles aren't being fired at the correct time, what's going to end up happening is you're not going to be relaxed, which means your muscles are going to be inhibiting your tendons' abilities to actually perform at their maximum, which is not very good at all, because that just means you're gonna get up to speed and then you're going to decelerate extremely fast. What you see when you look at 100-meter races, for example, look at Usain Bolt. A lot of his races, he tends to come from behind, or he's just in line with everyone else. And it looks like everyone else is slowing down whilst he's speeding up. What's actually happening is Usain Bolt has a higher top speed, which is great and all, but he's slowing down at a slower rate than everyone else, which is allowing him to catch up or stay match and beat everyone else, purely because he understands he needs to stay relaxed whilst he's sprinting. Because if you don't stay relaxed, you use more energy, and the more energy you use, the faster you're going to decelerate, which for 100 is extremely important, for 2 and for a 4 is extremely important. For a 60, you might be able to get away with it, though you should still stay relaxed in a 60, because once you go up against people who are much closer to your level, there's a good chance that if you're not relaxed, whoever's the most relaxed, I should really say, the most relaxed person in the field will win the race, as long as everyone else is even by about 40-50 meters. The person who wins the race will generally be the most relaxed, and the person who's able to time that dip correctly, which you generally shouldn't really be doing too much of, because it's mainly not your head that matters, it's your chest. So you want to make sure you stick out your chest. So you also want to make sure your dip is efficient if you actually want to be able to go sub 10. However, I would say if you was to go sub 10 because of a dip, it would feel a bit iffy, purely because it's like, yeah, I went sub 10, but I didn't easily go sub 10. So I can't guarantee the next time I race, I'm going to go sub 10. I might just go 10 seconds and stagnate. So understanding that a dip can help you win a race, but in a non-tight race, it might not be worthwhile dipping, especially if you want to break barriers. This isn't just for the 10 seconds, this is for the barriers before that, then is extremely important. Other than that, if you want to go sub 10, your nutrition is obviously extremely important. I've made videos on nutrition slightly, so I don't really need to go over that. But don't have an overly clean diet. Have a diet that works for you, because athletes are very different to bodybuilders and influencers, fitness influencers. We're not trying to have extremely low body fat percentages and look a certain way. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. So the body fat is slightly important, but we want to stay within the range. Generally, 8% will probably be the lowest you want to go. And even then, that's quite low. You want to stay like more higher to like 9, 10. And we want to make sure we're actually eating stuff that most influencers can't eat and bodybuilders can't eat, specifically carbs, because carbs is your energy source. All your energy when you're rinsing comes from carbs. You don't want to eat too much, but you want to make sure you're eating carbs so you're actually able to perform at your peak when you actually go into your races, so you're actually able to perform how you think you can perform or how you've performed whilst you're training. That's extremely important. The next thing is you want to make sure you train like how you would in so it's more similar to competition. You want to make sure that your training is the exact same as how it would be if you was to go into a competition, because your body will listen to the training, not what you want it to when it comes to a race. Because when the gun goes, everything goes blank, and your body's only going to really repeat what it's been taught, or one thing you're able to bring in with you into a race, which I've said in the previous video, should really just be your arms. Which means when you actually go into a race, if you're always tense when you're in your training sessions, or you always slow down in your training sessions, you always dip in your training sessions and other stuff like this, unless you forcefully stop one of those in exchange for not being able to bring in your arms when you go into sprinting to be the main focus, you're not going to perform as good as you would want to be able to. Because if you have all of these different things that you're focusing on that you should have already fixed, so you're actually able to perform at your best, all that's going to end up happening is you're going to have a lot of trouble when you actually go into your races. So make sure not only do you perform each rep and set like how you would in a race, you want to make sure that these reps and sets are the highest quality possible. You don't want to do reps and sets if the quality drops below 10%. It's just a waste of time. You're not going to get much faster than that. Other than that, mobility. You want to make sure you're extremely mobile, not flexible. It's extremely important that you know the difference between flexibility and mobility. You want to focus on mobility. You want to make sure that specifically your hips is extremely mobile, because your stride length is dictated by how mobile your hips are, and also how much force you put into the ground is dictated by how mobile your gluteal muscles are, which is also your hips. The less mobile and the less strong these muscles are, as well as other ones, then the higher chance of you getting injured for starters and not being able to travel as fast as you want to. Because for 100 meters, say you run 100 meters in 50 strides, that means your stride length is about 2 meters on average. So what would happen if you was able to get your stride length from 2 meters to 2.1 to 2.2 or to 2.3, 2.4 or 2.5, for example? Though I think those 2.4 and 2.5 have never been achieved, but imagine if he was able to get there. What would happen is the ground contacts that you have in total in the entirety of your race will be forced to go down, because now you're covering more distance with less steps. But if you're able to keep up the cadence that you had before, then obviously you can only go faster from that. Other than the major things you can focus on to try and go sub 10, there are some minor things you can also look at if you want to go sub 10. So these are literally the most minorest of things you could possibly think of. So there's like a quite big collection actually of things I have in my head, but I'm only going to name a couple of few. So for Su Bing-chan, he said everything changed for him once he figured out how to switch legs. So I don't remember which leg he started off in the blocks with before he went sub 10, but I know he switched to a different leg. So switching a leg you have as your lead leg in the blocks and your power leg is a potential way you could go sub 10, though it is a drastic measure, because you have to quickly trick your body and convince it and make it understand that you're no longer using your left leg to push off, but your right leg, or your right leg to push off. Now it's your left leg, which would obviously take quite a bit of time to understand. Though obviously once you get later on in the sprint, it's not going to affect you, but at the start it would be a quite big problem to deal with, because you need to teach these legs to know when to push and when to let go, and how to do all of the steps. Other than that, you have your arms. So the further out you have your arms, generally, the harder it is for you to come out of the blocks, because it takes more time because you're lower down. Moving it in generally is a good place to start, and the further out you get generally is usually when you're doing longer distances. So your arms are in really closely in 100, but when you're doing a 2 or a 4, your arms will generally tend to drift outwards slightly, partially because you're on a curve now. So you need to kind of get your arms to go from this position to this position instead of this position to this position, which you might end up banging yourself, because you want to make sure, imagine these are your arms. These arms you want to make sure are always in line with the lane. If you're going in a straight line, then your arms can just come up and separate and go in a straight line. But if you're going on a curved line, you also want your arms to go in a curved line whilst you stay upright, which is why your arms generally stay apart. So if you've noticed that your starts aren't the best in 100 meters, and your arms are out wide, this could be a factor that you might want to consider working on. Luckily though, this is a really easy one to fix. You just move in your arms and you see the change, because it might even trick you into thinking you have a slow reaction time. You might actually have a slow reaction time, but what might be the problem is just that your arms are so far apart that your legs have to do so much effort lifting you up. And you might also notice that your strides are wrong again whilst you're doing 100. And this could also partially be because, or even the 2 or the 4, and this could also whilst in the block, when you're coming out the blocks. And this could be because your arms are so far apart, it just forces you to get down so low. You're just not able to get into these positions properly, which would mean you need to bring in your arms so you're actually able to pull off the positions you want to be able to pull off. Other than that, it's generally just the blocks, to be honest, that you really need to change. You might also need to change your raise strategies, because there are some. If you don't know there's raise strategies for the 1, 2, and the 4, then 4, I wouldn't understand, but 4, I'd hope you'd understand there is raise strategies for, and a 2 as well. Though the 200-meter strategy tends to be the same for everyone. There's only really 1 or 2 you would normally pick, which would be to have a positive split or negative split the 200 meters. But for the 100 meters, a bit different, because you're no longer looking at splits, because you can't really tell what splits you're getting. You might not even notice where you are in a race. But what you can tell, however, is how hard you're pushing, and when you pushed and you're not getting anything else from your pushing. This is where you go from max speed to knowing when to just completely relax. Before, you should already be getting up to speed relax, but you need to know when to relax. And having an effective race strategy and making sure you play around with your acceleration, so you get there as late as possible, and you get to hold your top speed for longer than everyone else's, because you got there so late, you held it, and it's about the same as everyone else's, or maybe shorter or longer, it doesn't matter. But you start to decelerate later than everyone else in the field, could be what allows you to pull out a W against everyone else, and could be what allows you to go sub 10 if you're really close to it. Because the difference between you not going blank a 10 flat and a 9.99 could literally just be race strategy. Nothing to do with any of the other things I said. It could literally just be race strategy. If you're running 10 flat and you can't go sub 10, try to alter your race strategy, or if you haven't got one, form one, so you can fix any problems you have so you're actually able to go sub 10. However, I would believe that people who are at sub 10 and close to it would already understand that if they want to go sub 10, then their race strategy has to be impeccable, because you're going up against people who are sub 10 athletes who, if you see them ahead of you, it can affect your race, which could result in you not going sub 10. And if you're not going up against these athletes, you still need to remember that the race strategy you have could be the difference between 10 and 9.99. If you like my video, like the video, let me know in the comment section below. Check the description, because anything I forget to say in the video, I always put in the description. And if you like my content, subscribe. Helps the channel out a lot. I post every 2 days at 1 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. If you don't know when that is, just hit the bell and then you'll be notified instantly.